entirety of the Super Smash Bros. Community. This is Beyond the Metagame. I'm your host, Peon, this week live from Congo Jungle. I'm joined, as always, by my wonderful co-host, AV. AV, how you doing, big guy?
I'm doing great. I will attest to the fact that the DK rap is the greatest piece of composed music in the known universe.
Bro, I mean, even if we're just talking about like the Donkey Kong soundscape, I mean, we use a Donkey Kong remix song in our intro. And how do you explain that?
It's just, you can't explain it. It's an incredible game. It has incredible music. I exploit the character to ding dong people at 50%.
It's a shame because I think that Congo Jungle is like the one most overused asset in terms of Donkey Kong locale. There's so many interesting settings that Smash Bros could incorporate, and again they do jungle after jungle. But that said, this week AV and I are going to be talking with our good buddy Gpik. You know, Gpik known for commentating on some of the biggest stages in Smash. You know, commentated 2G Championship, very notably commentated MKLeo versus Zaki, one of the biggest upsets in Smash 4 history. And we're really excited to have him on for you guys this episode.
Yeah, I think we're going to get into some really fun stuff, particularly talking about how the life as a commentator and regular life crossover, how life as a gamer or playing Smash and being a commentator crossover. And he's going to kind of riff on the fact that being a commentator is a very developed experience and is very involved. And he goes very emotionally into a lot of things that I'm really, really excited to show you all. I think he did a really good job of capturing what the essence of what being a good commentator is.
All right, so our interview with Gpik in just 1 second. Welcome back to Beyond the Metagame. This week, we're talking with my favorite commentator in California. Some would say the best in California. We're joined by Gpik. Gpik, how you doing, big guy?
I'm doing fantastic. That is really high praise. You know D1 lives in California, right? And Bam, and some other... You know what? I'm not even going to get into it. Thank you, though. I very much appreciate
Who's D1?
That.
Who's D1?
He's this pretty good Smash Bros. Commentator. I don't know. He's done some things, some famous sets like the Chillin versus Leffen 5-0 thing, and
I was sick that day. I don't count.
Okay.
But we also have AV, of course, and I just thought that this would be a great group of people to talk to because AV and myself, you know, we kind of grew up in the commentary underbelly together. AV provided the first stream at a Santa Barbara local that kind of ushered me into the world of commentary. And you know, much after that, much later than that, I had the privilege of commentating with Gpik on a couple of occasions. You know, we shared a couple of Modelo Negros, and less fortunately so, we also commentated an Olimar Ditto one time.
Most fortunately so. Do you know how rare Olimar Dittos are? And I'll have you know that Solomar versus Japes set was so amazing. I still remember it even now.
It's like not all rare things have value though, Gpik. Like
but their rarity gives them value. This is the basis of economics.
Oh no.
Yeah, I think I have to go. Everything I learned in school, I have to go Gpik on that one.
Have you guys ever heard of the paradox of value? How like diamonds are valuable and water is not.
So that's not true because diamonds are not rare.
Well, fair enough.
Diamonds are held by cartel economics, by one group of people that just supplies that like just injects supply every now and then.
It's forced rarity. It's artificial rarity, but it's still rarity.
Yeah, but are you telling me there's like one banjo buried in Earth's crust, and this banjo just happens to be made out of like Cinnamon Toast Crunch boxes, right? And it's one of a kind. But I wouldn't pay. Well, maybe I would pay like $5 for that.
Well, yeah, you prove the. I mean, we would pay money for the novelty of it, but like part of what makes it harder to spend a lot of money on is that it's a renewable resource, the Cinnamon Toast Crunch boxes, so that we could just get more of them and make another banjo, like a counterfeit banjo, but like no one's gonna tell the difference.
Plus you hand Ed Sheeran that banjo, you're printing money, baby. You're printing money. But I want to delve in.
Yeah, I completely sidetracked you.
No, I was the one who started talking about Cinnamon Toast Crunch. But Gpik, I had watched plenty of streams featuring your commentary over the years, tuning into NorCal locals. Notably, you would make appearances at places such as Gamers Rebooted, a local in Sacramento that I would tune into, as well as NorCal regionals. And I had heard your commentary, and I had been exposed to your brand and had enjoyed what I listened to. But for me, I really didn't become like a Gpik fan, I suppose, until I saw Fatality versus Elegant at the 2GG Championship Saga. And I believe you were commentating with Korean?
That is correct.
And
yeah.
I was like, these guys are just electrifying. And first of all, you did a great job making that set entertaining. And, second, what do you think your kind of commentary breakthrough was?
So I guess the question is, what do you mean as breakthrough? Because it's similar to like your growth as a player, right? Where like you don't really graduate like several tiers with just a single advice. So it's not like, oh, block more, and then suddenly I was in winter semis, right? It's just like block more, and then you do a little bit better. You take a game against the guy who 2-0'd you last time. It's like every there's like a bunch of little steps. So it depends like what line you're thinking of, and then it maybe is easier to pin it down,
Yeah, well, I guess that's a fair point. That's a fair point. But I'll, to counterpoint that, I think like a lot of players will reference like a certain piece of sage wisdom that inspired them. They had like a certain performance that in a tournament where they had this new kind of renewed sense of confidence that they were later able to apply in other brackets. And some people I think can mark a breakthrough in their play, maybe a breakout performance. So I guess maybe would you say you didn't have one breakout appearance, but you kind of just gradually worked up the commentary ranks? Is that kind of how you think of it?
It's a combination. So okay, I guess I'm about to just give a very long recounting of everything. But in terms of advice, actually, a great source of advice for me when I was starting out was the old main NorCal commentator, DC. Not to be confused with Florida DC, who now lives in Seattle, but like West Coast DC. He's since retired, but he was kind of he was just the head commentator coordinator for Showdown, which ran the Foundry series and stuff. So he was kind of the main commentary focused person. So he was giving advice to all the commentators and stuff, would figure out commentary schedules for all the events and that sort of thing. So I guess my first breakthrough would honestly be me commentating with him back at a Foundry crew battle, because like before then I was like super nervous forever applying to Foundry because I kept thinking, oh no, I'm not good enough, I can't get a good enough montage, I'm not even going to try. Not montage, commentary reel. But what ended up happening was a friend of mine was tired of me making excuses to not apply. So our rule in NorCal is that when you have a crew battle, each crew gets to pick one commentator for the duo. The idea is that commentator is completely unrepentantly biased towards your side, and you get a nice little clash happening between the commentators to go with the action. So he picked me as his representative, and the other crew picked DC. So I started commentating with him for the crew battle, and I remember as I was getting ready to like take off the headset, he's like, hey, do you want to just keep commentating for the rest of the night? I'm like, oh my God, I actually did a good job. I guess I'm pretty decent at this. So like that was like the first time where I'm like, okay, maybe I can actually like look onward and listen to people when they tell me you should apply for this, and I should just actually apply. Then part of the other reason why I brought up DC is he used to do a podcast years ago where he was interviewing community members, especially commentators in Smash Brothers and wider esports. Like he did an episode with Prague, he did an episode with Scar, and he did an episode with James Chen. And the James Chen episode is actually fantastic because James Chen has like 10, 15, close to 20 years of commentary experience under his belt. Like he kind of was one of the first commentators, period, for fighting games in general. So he just had a lot of great wisdom in that. A big part of it was just sort of being motivated in terms of directing your commentary to the things that you are genuinely excited about, like the things that you want to stop and like people on the streets like, dude, check out how awesome this thing is, and focusing that attention on what genuinely moves you. Because if you aren't really authentic about what you're talking about, the audience detects it like immediately. If you're able to fake being that authentic, you should just become an actor instead of doing esports commentary, you know? So that just, oh yeah, sorry, you were gonna say something.
Do you think Ashton Kutcher is just a failed like melee commentator?
I think that's what maybe Punk'd originally started as a vehicle to do, was to like get people playing against like, you know, Korean DJ and stuff, and they realize, oh no, he's actually really good at the very end. But luckily they branched out and created something really memorable there for the pop culture.
I think that's really cool how like you can point to like one moment where you kind of were able to catapult into being a commentator. I think something else that I want to talk about is, did you feel like you had a relation? Did you feel like you immediately said, this is my role, this is what I want to grow into, and this is how I want to be viewed as? Or is it something that oscillated?
It oscillated. It oscillated a lot in the beginning. Like, even though like I started getting the chance to commentate at Foundry, I still consider myself like a competitor first. So I'd play and I'd get like pretty decently far into bracket. I'd usually make it to like 9th, you know, scratching it to top 8 and stuff. And then once I got knocked out, then I'd be like commentating for the rest of the night. And then a few things kind of happened one after another that kind of made me focus less on commentary and more on and less on playing and more on commentary. I think one of the big ones I can point to is people would beat me in bracket, like they'd beat me in losers, and they'd say things like, good, finally now you can start commentating. And I'd be like, oh, okay. I think people prefer me in one role more than the other.
Get this Game & Watch off my screen.
And on the mic.
That actually happened a ton of times with Peon. I think he was definitely one of our best commentators, if not our best commentator, and he would be in grand finals and winners finals.
Yeah. Thanks, bud. Yeah. That was funny. Well, Gpik, I want to put you on the spot here. Do you know where who said this quote? And it was not a historical figure or anything like that. And I'll just go ahead and start. And that is it. Zaki does it. He takes out MK Leo, the #1 seed, moving on out of pools in the winner's side. King DDD 2-1. Holy, what on earth? Hyrule Saga. Wow.
Wow. Yeah, that would be me at Hyrule Saga. When Zaki beat MK Leo, yeah.
I just wanted to segue into that, and that was the only way I could think how. You have the privilege of saying that you commentated on what was perhaps the most shocking, craziest upset in Smash 4 history. I mean, maybe a rival, you could argue like Latai over Zero might be higher, but it's in that conversation, right? Yeah. I guess walk me through how you feel right now, knowing that's something you could say, and walk me through like what it was like being on the mic in a moment like that.
So it's interesting because this was actually something I was thinking about earlier today. How I've had the chance to commentate some amazing sets. And it's crazy because like for the first few days of it, after like a really great set that you get to commentate, like you do think about it a bit and like that sort of thing. And you pull up the VOD to like listen again to see like what kind of moments really stood out for you and that sort of thing. But then like after a few months, you just kind of forget that it happened until somebody brings up really big upsets or like that sort of thing. A lot of times I forget about it and then somebody brings up Zaki and MK later. I'm like, oh yeah, I was talking when that happened. But like it's crazy to just like sit back and think on it. Also just because like that is the most viewed thing that I am involved with. Like by miles. That YouTube VOD has 200,000 views on it.
Yeah, I think it was like 220. I looked today.
Yeah,
this quote.
it had 150,000 like 2 days after it happened.
That's
and like
crazy.
that was like exactly. It was crazy. It was like retweeted by Nintendo and stuff. Like I'm not used to this many eyes on something that I'm involved with, but like luckily, you know, it seems like I did a pretty good job because nobody like was in the comments saying, "Oh my god, like one of these commentators really needs to shut up and let Max talk." Like nothing like that. So I'm like, okay, I did adequate at least on my performance.
Well, I love the quote that I read because it's so. I mean, you're one of the most articulate people I've ever spoken to, but in that moment, upon the release, once you saw that climb hazard, once you saw MKLeo just descending into the blast zone inevitably, you just kind of lost it, and I loved it. It was so you were unhinged because, and I think that so clearly communicated the frantic nature of what was on screen. You know how shocking it was. I mean, when you were that shocked, you could tell as a viewer, whoa, that was huge, right? So I loved it. I thought it was hilarious.
Oh yeah, no, it was. Yeah, I was genuinely like mind broken. Like to talk to like because you also asked what it was like to commentate that set as it was happening, and like you can also just hear the transformation as you watch the set, right? Because in the first game, me and Max are just idly chatting and stuff. I'm pretty sure we both have the same thought in mind. They're like, Zaki's going to put up a fight because he's a really good player. But it's DDD versus Cloud, right? At the end of the day, not just Cloud, it's Leo's Cloud. It is the person who is a contender for #1 that season. He eventually was actually #1 that entire PGR season. And he has to go up against it. So, like, we're, like, vaguely interested in stuff where we talk up, like, the good plays and stuff. And Zaki takes the first thought. And the thought is like, oh, cool, this will actually be kind of close. This is going to be a fun set to talk for. And then he takes, the first game. And it becomes a little bit disconcerting, but it's like, no, it's fine. Leo's got the download. He's down a game, but he's going to bring it back. And then the second game was too close. And then partway through the third game, when, like, even though Zaki was down a stock, once he had momentum and took Leo's stock, that's when I actually realized, oh my god, I'm commentating a set where DDD is beating MK Leo. That's when I just realized this has a very real chance of happening. And it was just like, yeah, like you could see when I listened to it again, I could hear the change in my voice just immediately when I realized this is real. Like, this is actually a serious thing that can happen. And yeah.
That's so wild. Like in the moment, did you have like the same emotions as when like you were about to make an upset in bracket? Was it like the same?
It's like all the excitement, but like none of the nerves because like it's not my skin on the line, but it's still like something monumental might just happen here tonight. And like it was this morning. It was like 10 a.m. It was like something monumental is gonna happen maybe in the next 30 seconds to a minute. Like
yeah, I mean, but it's like there's actually some kind of like nerves associated with it. It's just that there's this chance that you get to be associated with this like crazy moment. It's like actually, yeah. When you put it like that, yeah, there are nerves. Are just like I better not screw this up. Like, when they want to make derail of this moment, I better not be screaming completely incomprehensibly. I better not say profanity. Like those sort of things. Yeah.
Like when Zaki took the set, you could have said anything you wanted to. You could have proposed to a woman. You could have like plugged your SoundCloud and.
Oh my god! That's actually brilliant.
And hundreds of thousands of people would have been on your SoundCloud.
You see, you don't want to be that one guy who ran up after Genesis 5 Grand Finals and like did a dab in the center screen. You remember that from Melee?
Oh yeah.
They had to actually Photoshop him out because they didn't want to lose that moment.
Oh, that's crazy. I mean, somebody actually did a backflip. You can see after Zaki took it, but that was kind of hype.
That was perfect, actually. That guy doing a backflip, like he helped carry that moment to being like legendarily epic for just all of Smash Bros. Like that backflip, dude. Like holy crap!
what an exclamation point!
Yeah.
But Gpik, I wanna no. Now that we got you talking about commentary, I really want to kind of probe your mind a little bit and hear what you have to say more generally about like commentary as a craft, right? So I think that commentary is one of the most polarizing, aspects of competitive Smash. A lot of people in Twitch chat, even in person, on Twitter, etc., especially on online, are very critical of commentators, commentating styles. So I guess, where do you, as an established commentator, what do you think the definition of a good commentary is? A lot of people I will cite really hate bias in commentary. Do you think that, do you think that is good or bad inherently? And also, just give me your definition, I suppose.
So I'm gonna talk about the bias thing because that will give me time to collect my thoughts about the bigger question, because it's a tough one to answer.
Sure.
But the bias, I think bias can have its place in the sense of like when there's a narrative. Like I'm pretty sure I came off as a little biased, for example, for Zaki, right? Because that's the underdog, right? And that's like what everybody is rooting for is the DDD. And in that sense, like if you have one of those underdog narratives, being a little bit focused more on talking about what the underdog has to do in order to win in this moment, like that's what everybody wants to know, because everybody wants that person to win. So it does have a time and a place, but like obviously you have to have like careful use of it, and especially in terms of never talking down on what anybody else is doing too. I think that's one of the first things that makes, in my opinion, for good commentary is like generally you don't want to make people question why they're watching the stream, right? You want people to like be like, yeah, this is interesting to watch and stuff. So like not crapping on the game at all. Generally making it. I remember now. I remember what I think good commentary is. Okay, so what I look for in commentary, this is just my own personal taste, is I think the commentator's job is to make the intangible things happening in a set readily apparent to the audience. Because a lot of people are able to kind of pick up and get a general strong gist of what's going on. Like they can know when somebody is stomping the other dude really hard. It's similar to how if you're driving your car, you can tell when your car isn't working right, but you might not be able to say why because you're not a mechanic. But like the commentator is somebody who has that level of expertise, both of player history, which you can't pull up immediately because you don't know it all offhand, like in terms of sets and stuff, or in terms of matchup knowledge, and in terms of just player strategy and insight for what high-level competitive play is like mentally, in terms of frame data, all of this information that they can pull from to help fill you in on whatever details you might not be able to see immediately in that moment. And that helps add to that texture so you can like catch little nuances that you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. Because you could still watch like, a lot of these great sets and have a pretty good time with the commentary off, but really good commentary will like add dimensions to it where like you'll realize, oh, like this play was actually incredibly risky. And so that's how much this player is feeling himself in this moment, that he's willing to make this commitment right now. Now I see that this player is actually really bold, and I have more of a personality to watch this set with in mind. Or even if it's just humor as well, right? Because that sometimes characters do things that are really funny. Like you might just like miss over that, like, yeah, he down smashed 3 times in a row, but you want to like realize like, yeah, but like he's down smashed like 8 times in the past 10 seconds too. And then like all of that humor can start building in as well. So good commentary, I think, helps bring that all out, because the people who get really involved and like jump out of their chairs crazy and screaming in stadiums and stuff, they're able to see all these things, but the more casual viewer maybe can't. And that's a big part of maybe what's differentiating them from being a casual fan and a more like hardcore fan who would like actually love to see these events live, is that they haven't seen what those layers are yet. And I think that's like a big thing that great commentary can offer.
Yeah, I definitely like the fact that you made it a framework rather than a certain style of commentary, because that kind of leaves a lot of room in terms of a role that a commentator can play in terms of the duo that people can kind of bounce back and forth with. I kind of want to get your thoughts on that. Does there always have to be a kind of a yin and a yang in commentary, or are there some really good commentary duos do everything, or they both do everything? Well, what do you think is the optimal combination, or is there no optimal combination?
I don't think there's an optimal one. I think it's kind of like asking if there's an optimal flavor of frozen yogurt. It's like It depends
Mango.
what sort of toppings you want, and it depends. Yeah, this is mango. It depends on the toppings. It depends on what palette you're looking for. Like if you want like crazy analytical commentary, you know, I know some people love it. Like I like Bam and Stripes when they have commentated together. I know some people don't because they're a little bit more low key than other duos, but they're also really focused on terms of like analyzing the game style. So like if that's the sort of commentary performance you want, then that's the sort of duo you have. And I think like commentators all bring their own kind of like personality flavor, you know, to the mixing pot. And some flavors just don't get along. Some people just don't have chemistry, or they have like bad chemistry where they can talk for a while with each other, but it's never about the game. Like I have some friends that I don't do good commentary with. Like we get along great, but we're never talking about what's actually important. But yeah, I'd say it really depends on that sort of tone. Because like I guess to pull for another example, like the 2GG championships last year, they were going for a very more esports, like really polished, high energy sort of feeling, right? Like they essentially told us we kind of want this to feel like the Smash equivalent of like what Worlds is for League. And like with that in mind, that's why like Korean and I were like such high energy going into our block, is because like that's what League commentators sound like when they commentate. So it's like, okay, we're gonna do that.
Yeah, I actually want to get your thoughts on that. Like, so I actually watch a ton of League esports. I've been really following the scene for like 7 years, and I want to have you like pulled a lot from watching League commentators? Is there stuff that crosses over? And when you're studying to be like a really good commentator, can you talk about what you can cross over or pull over or study from commentators in other games?
So unfortunately, I don't follow MOBAs at all. Literally, the only time I watched Worlds was to prepare for that event.
Oh well, that's on topic.
Yeah. But like that being said, I do think there's actually a lot you can learn from other games and bring them over. I mean, most of what I follow tends to be platform fighters or other fighting games, so it's a little bit easier to carry together. But like, I've seen little bits of StarCraft and stuff when I'm with friends, or I've seen like even sports commentary and stuff. It's kind of interesting to watch just in terms of paying attention to how the commentators are able to like segue from topic to topic and how they choose, you know, what to talk about, especially if you're thinking about doubles and that sort of format where you have multiple points of interest and that sort of thing. But then there's also I know I watched something else and I can't remember, so I'll just talk about fighting game commentary stuff that I've learned. I think a lot of FGC commentary is really different from the way that Smash Brothers does it. And this is actually for more reference on this, like the DC James Chen episode I mentioned had like a great conversation about it, where like in Smash commentary, there's the temptation to like talk about every move as it hits and that sort of thing. Whereas in Street Fighter, it's more like, oh man, he's really going in on him right now. You know, like, because that's the important takeaway, is that the guy is getting comboed really hard. People don't really need to know what all the frame links are. Maybe if it's like a really hard combo, you can mention like, wow, he's going for the super flashy stuff, but you don't really need to say what that flashy stuff is. Another one that I really like, another thing that I really like is, I remember the Guilty Gear top 8 at EVO last year. The in-house commentary was actually fantastic. That was like some of the best commentary I've heard for any game. And I say that because I never have watched Guilty Gear before in my life. And that top 8 became my favorite top 8. And that was a big part to the commentary, where they knew just what details were important for somebody just coming in to know what the tension points of the set is. Because like, it's an anime fighter. There's really big combos in that game. So as an outsider, you just assume everything might be death. So what they would very clearly do in a lot of situations is there'd be an opening and the guy would have like 40% health, and the commentator would loudly say, "This will not kill. He's going to need to pull off one more reset." And just by saying that, I'm now looking for where the combo drops and what that reset is going to look like. And now I'm at the edge of my seat thinking, can he escape before he loses this next mix-up? And just having those moments of clarity and figuring out what those points are for the viewer of like, no, this is actually a critical decision moment, and pointing that out, I think, is really valuable to do.
Yeah, you know, I think you've done such a good job of like referencing so many different aspects of certain, you know, pieces of commentary that you've enjoyed quite heavily, or both how you think that commentary should be handled in general. And I wanted to bring up a trend I've been noticing in a lot of kind of like mid, slash like newer level commentators, or even just like mid higher level commentators, where I feel like a lot of people really want to be commentators, but they don't want to commentate. I think one thing that I really noticed from my time that I spent with you, Gpik, is how, I mean, you can just tell from this. We've been talking for 27 minutes, and for every single minute, you've just been gushing about the craft. You clearly love it, and you clearly put a lot of time and thought into it. So, do you agree with me, or well, maybe I shouldn't phrase it like that. Do you at all empathize with the idea that some people are too focused on being a commentator and not actually honing their craft? The actual verb.
Yeah, I actually I understand, that sentiment, because that's something I have seen. You kind of see it with a lot of people, especially at the local level and stuff, who like when they first want to get on the mic and that sort of thing, you kind of can sense the difference almost immediately between people who like are interested in watching the sets and dissecting them and like actually like talking about it and like, storytelling, all that stuff, and the people who kind of want to just oh man, it's okay. I tweeted this. Oh, it's the yipes. You know what I mean? Like the people who try to be yipes, but you can't be yipes because only yipes is yipes. But they think of that as that's what commentary is having that strong of a personality. So they try to have that level of personality from the outset, and you just can't really do that. At least if you're going to imitate him, and it just like comes off terribly because, like you said, they're making it more about themselves as being a commentator as opposed to being about the game itself. And I think kind of the difference between those two crowds is that the people who really like commentating, if they're watching just a game like in the audience or at home with their friends and stuff, they will be loudly saying stuff about the plays being made. They're like, oh my God, he covered this option and all that stuff, and like explaining it to everybody else just on the couch because they just want to hope that everybody's on the same page and enjoying it as much as they are. And like, whereas I think somebody who's just wanting to be a commentator to just be a commentator, I wonder whether they have that same instinct.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. What's the solution to that? What do you say? Like, what's step one for a budding commentator?
I guess it's like the first one is to just assess why you commentate. Like to just be honest whether it is because. I mean, there's nothing wrong with like liking people, paying attention to you and stuff. That is kind of fun to talk and know that a bunch of people are listening. But like, I think commentating, the first thing, first and foremost, has to be the game itself, right? You have to actually care about the game that's happening on the screen more often than anything. It's that great Futurama quote, which applies to literally everything, which is when you do your job right, no one's sure you've done anything at all. Where like a lot of great commentary, like it doesn't draw attention to itself as being good sometimes it does actually, like the fantastic, incredible commentary does. But like a lot of commentary doesn't, but it's still great because it's making sure everything is moving along and that everybody is informed. And you have to like have an ear out listening for it. Otherwise, like, most people will just accept it, eat it, and keep going. And like, it's a similar thing where your goal is to add value to the game that's happening on screen. So like, I guess as a budding commentator, it'd be like, first make sure your goal is for the game itself. So like, I guess I feel like I'm rambling a lot here, but I keep thinking of things as I'm talking, which is a problem. One thing I've noticed, and this is partly like that elegant fatality set actually, and partly like Rivals like top 8s and stuff that I've done, is every time I've gone into a block like where I'm nervous and like I'm thinking like, oh man, like what if I mess up, and I'm thinking about myself. Like sometimes I do okay, and like sometimes it's less than good or whatever. But every time I've gone into a block and I've put my focus on what can I do to make sure like this games look as awesome as possible. And I don't even think about how I might look, just think about how much like the players have invested to make it this far and all of that stuff. I always turn in my best work. And I think that's like the main thing that everybody needs to focus on is like, what can I do to make the game be as engaging as possible, as opposed to myself?
Yeah, I can definitely vibe with that. I think there's a lot of giving up, yourself and giving up your ego when you walk in the door for a lot of things that a lot of crafts, a lot of art, a lot of things that that require so much prep work and so much and so much dedication that like you want people to recognize you for that, but then you realize that that bringing too much attention to yourself in that case is actually really negative. Which so you have this really weird balance of wanting to be recognized and wanting to produce really quality content at the same time.
Yeah. It's kind of like for like film editing and stuff, right? Like really good film editing, you're not supposed to notice, right? Best editing probably isn't noticed because if it was noticed, it wasn't that good of editing, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I can definitely like see that because like I've been getting into DJing and I've realized like the more it's always less is more in everything. It's like everything that you do, everything in terms of even playing the game, which is actually why I want to transition into that.
Mm-hmm.
I want to transition into like how does commentating affect your gameplay and vice versa? Do you ever feel like as you develop as a commentator, you develop as a player? Because I know you're a pretty experienced player in the game, and like Peon, you've like always had this like counterpart to like playing and commentating. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on how both of these things interact with each other and whether they help or.
You cut out there at the end. Say that one more time.
I just wanted to understand your progression through both being a player and a commentator.
So you're right; they do feed into each other a lot of times. Where like things you notice, where as a player, as you get into the higher level situations and stuff, you can reference those feelings and those thought processes back on the microphone, and like it comes off better because it's like actually lived experience. It's part of the reason why top players tend to do really well on the mic even without like formal commentary training, is they have the firsthand experience to be able to talk about all these situations really nicely. And then I mean, part of the reason I got into commentary, part of it was air conditioning, but the other part of it was I was actually really greedy, and I was asking, why are these players making it further into bracket than I am? So I paid really close attention to what they were doing and what I wasn't doing. And then next week, I tried doing what they were doing a little bit more, and I find I was doing a little bit better. So like a lot of that is also you look at how they handle situations. Like, oh, he doesn't commit on the ledge when like the set has just started because he doesn't really know what the opponent is going to do off of it. He keeps non-committal, and I should probably just stay pretty non-committal myself in that situation. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
Oh, I was gonna say one more thing and I forgot. So go on.
Yeah, no worries, man. I just wanted to agree and say that's really cool that they kind of feed into each other. Something on this show that we've talked about a lot is how it's really important to be in tune with multiple things and not to be always focused on one thing, because your progression in something else can give you motivation to kind of go back and grind out the other thing. So in terms of that, in terms of like development as a player, like did you ever feel like you hit a plateau as a commentator, or you hit a plateau as a player, but you were able to feed off of excitement and enjoyment from the other thing in order to like boost your feeling or your motivation generally about the game?
It's interesting because I only when I was commentating at first, right, I wasn't thinking about my progression as much as a commentator. And once I started thinking about my progression as a commentator, that's when I started thinking less about my progression as a player. I guess I only had so much investment, and at a certain point, I just kind of stopped caring as much about my results in bracket, which is why I kind of stopped entering in general. So I can't really say that fully has come for me, but I will say that, like, for example, getting involved with Rivals of Aether, like, definitely reignited my passion as, like, a competitor, like, that sort of sense. And I noticed that also did make me then more genuinely excited then for a lot of commentary, even though it was back in Smash and stuff, because I remembered, like, how exciting it is to be on the edge of a really close set and think, like, oh, my God, I might be able to pull this out and beat the guy who's, like, beaten me the past since we've known each other.
Right.
Yeah, so to piggyback off that, you're in the platform fighting game world, right? You're this you're this guy. You know, you've made a name for yourself, reputation. You're this guy who gets to commentate 2G championships. You know, elegant. You know, Fatality versus Elegant. Elegant, who I did beat a couple weeks ago.
You did?
Yeah.
Dude, what? Congrats! I didn't know that.
sorry.
Please keep plugging yourself, dude. That's nice.
That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. But you've gotten to this point, right? In this certain context, in this community, that you've proved your competence in kind of a public sense. People look at you and they're, oh, it's Gpik. That's the good commentator. You know, you have your reputation precedes you. How has that affected how you are in real life, and how does Gpik the commentator, relate to Gpik the guy? You know,
that's actually a really interesting question. It's definitely interesting because, like, I remember there was a time where, like, if someone recognized me who I didn't know, like, I'd be like super thrown off, and I'd be like, what did I do? Like, did I break something? But like now somebody's like, oh, hey, Gpik. I'm like, oh, he's going to compliment me on my commentary. And he's like, dude, I really like your commentary. Yeah, there it is. And like, it sounds super egotistical to say it, but like, I'm like, it's still, don't get me wrong. Like, it feels really great for people to like just recognize me and go out of their way to say that like they really like my commentary. Like that actually is like an unprompted compliment completely turns a day around. But like, I am getting kind of more used to it as time goes on. Like it's not an alien concept to me anymore. But it does make me feel kind of more confident in a sort of tournament setting. Because ordinarily, I'm actually a really introverted person. I usually don't walk up and talk to people at all. Like, at least not being the first person talking, that sort of thing. So like having other people kind of like, come up and talk to me and sort of thing, it kind of makes me feel like, oh yeah, this is kind of my environment. So like I could feel free to talk to whoever, that sort of thing, without being as much in my shell. So I think that's helped quite a bit there. And I feel like I've gotten more extroverted just in general as a result of commentating so much. It's because now I have that assured confidence. Like, hey, when I talk, people, they listen, or at least they don't get angry at me, and that's pretty nice to know.
So, talking about all of the optics that surround you as like a big figure in the community, there is something about the fact that there's a lot riding on Smash, and there's a lot that grassroots movements need to support you. And in terms of going into Ultimate and going into the future of, how do we make a career like commentating sustainable? Especially because it is this thing that requires a lot of dedicated time, a really, really good talent. Not everyone, it's very clear that not everyone is made out to be a commentator, and it requires something that is very unique. However, we don't, as a community, and as in terms of funding, in terms of just general support, a lot of times commentators are unpaid or always have to do things at a loss. And there isn't this nice progression to being a really for people to fill this niche naturally. How do you think that the community at large should really push this into being something that people can support themselves on?
Man, that's a real tough question. Honestly, like, I'm not sure if I've been commentating enough to be able to have like a proper answer for it, because like there's so much that feeds into it. There's the, like you hinted at, like that chicken and the egg problem of like commentary quality will increase like substantially when people can actually do it for a living, because then they can assuredly take the time to research and everything for all of their blocks and stuff, and like deliver fantastic work, because that's their full-time job now, is delivering that performance. But then people are like, well, yeah, but currently commentators aren't doing that, so their commentary isn't worth that much money to pay them enough to do it, right. Which means they'll never have the resources to do it, which means that you'll see how this goes. Which means that, like, as a commentator, like, right now, from my position, it feels like it's like a gamble, where like if you want to try to make that leap into like, this is my profession, like you have to start working as if it is, with no guarantee you'll actually ever make that money. Exactly. which is absolutely terrifying. So like, understandably, almost nobody is doing that right now.
Yeah,
But
what do you think about that transition between right where you're at, Gpik, where you are the kind of person that can travel around, go to different majors all around the country, in Rivals or in Smash Four, and you can get a spot at a lot of these events. You've worked your way up and you've proven yourself. But even then, there is a kind of a very small pool at the tippy top in most inner circle of commentary that seems almost impenetrable from the outside.
mhm.
So my question to you is, well, no, well, first I'll just say, I don't. It's my fundamental belief. I don't think that we'll use you as an example are a worse commentator than any of the more established ones, such as the D ones, the TK Breezes, the EEs. I think that you are a different flavor of yogurt. To use our analogy earlier, I think
Mhm.
that I enjoy your commentary equally, but differently, but equally as I do any of the really really good commentators that have any of my favorites, right? So as a community, do you think that that this is a problem? Should we make it more accessible for the other great commentators to get, roles in the biggest stage? Um, or yeah. I suppose that's all I have.
It's really interesting to think about both, because like I this whole time I've been thinking about this question, right? It's been from like the commentary side of just like, yeah, there's a sense that there are people that are like understandably above me, right? Like they have been doing this much longer than I have. They've definitely put in way more work than I have. But then like there's a sense of like, well, since they're all in front of me and there's only so many slots, like to get top 8 at a tournament, like that's pretty tough. Like you can only allow there to be 7 people better than you. To get a top 8 block at a tournament as a commentator, there can really only be one person more impressive than you there, because otherwise you're not even making it onto that block. So like it is such a tight knit thing that in order to make it that far, like it kind of feels like you have to be better than everybody else. And that's the way that I always thought about it. And I'm like, well, that's just the way it crumbles, right? Like, unfortunately, we can only ever have 2 commentators up there. So there's always going to be just that tight knit of group of people that kind of have that locked down in the bag. But one perspective I heard was that the downside of having it be this close knit of like this, essentially like the same tier all the times, is that the commentary can kind of start sounding the same from an audience perspective, where it's just like it's another event where we have like D1 and Katara, and like I love D1 and Katara. That's one of my favorite pairings. But part of what made it stand out was because like it was kind of rare, like Frostbite, like they kind of came together, and that was when Sue and Zero happened, and like it was a great duo with a fantastic set and stuff, and they also worked together at GTX. But like I wouldn't want that to be necessarily every single duo, because then we won't necessarily get to see what other fantastic duos we haven't discovered yet are, right? And that's something that like comes to mind is like I'd like to see, even if like maybe like I don't necessarily have to be in that conversation. I'm fine because so many more people are more deserving. But to keep kind of swirling that flask around and just trying out new combinations of people and just seeing kind of what happens in that sort of sense, because it's hard to guess what sort of combination is going to be actually fire until you try it out. And in the meantime, it will make that event memorable. Like we remember Smash and Splash 4, like when you say that, people think of the top 8 where, people think Void won, and they also think Zero and Coney, right? And that was the only time Zero and Coney had commentated together. And that's super memorable for people. And like, we can have more memorable top 8s as well, I think, if we keep experimenting with that front. Because at the very least, if the top 8 pans out the way we're used to seeing, at least the people talking about it will be different. And that will change that experience too.
Yeah, I just want to just talk about that Zero and Coney top 8. It felt so visceral the way that Zero was just going in. It was incredible. There was something really emotional about hearing someone be that excited about the game. And it was like this guy who's just been like clearly dominated the entire game, and he comes in and he just shows why he like that you need to love the game the most to be the best at this game. And it just came out so well. It was such a beautiful moment.
It was and that's why top players can do it so well, is because they already have that passion, because they were in the lab every single day in order to compete in events and stuff, and they have the know-how. So like that's a perfect recipe.
Yeah, well, Gpik, I want to touch on one last thing before we wrap it up. We're running a little bit out of time, but I really wanted to get your perspective on this before we signed off. Going into Ultimate, where do you think Smash is as an esport? I'm talking about like on day one of Ultimate dropping. Where does it stand as an esport? And then, what do you feel are the potentials of Smash Ultimate? Let's say both in a timeline where Nintendo does endorse the community and inject money into it, and a timeline where we stay grassroots as we are.
So Ultimate's going to be really interesting for like, because it's reminding me of like a lower key version of like the hype that was building up around Dragon Ball Fighters, where I'm hearing people excited for it that were not excited at all for Smash 4. And like some of them aren't even Smash players at all. Like Sonic Fox is talking about it. We have, people at Evo were looking at the booth and stuff that were just traditional FGC. So like there's a chance that it's definitely going to explode way bigger than Smash 4 currently is, because Smash 4, I think, put in a lot of infrastructure, even though the game's currently like waning in terms of activity. We still have all these Facebook communities. We still have all these established weeklies now, unlike what Brawl had going into Smash 4. So the moment Ultimate comes out, all of these things are just going to explode with activity. And there's going to be like a crazy, crazy amount of people. But it's hard to gauge how much people that's actually going to be. But me and Sturm were talking about this. Lord Sturm were talking about it, and I agree with him the more that I think about it. That like the first 3 months of Ultimate are probably going to be so busy and hectic in terms of majors happening everywhere across the country and stuff that like business will be great for commentators, because we're going to actually be in demand, is what he suspects. Is because like everybody is going to want to run an event and want to run it with commentators that know what they're doing. And it's going to, like, for once be, instead of fighting each other for the same slots, we'll probably just be able to have a better chance of finding a good slot just everywhere else. And I think from a commentary perspective, that's actually going to be really interesting to see that sort of scattering and stuff. Whether the game has legs, I don't know. And then whether Nintendo supports it, like, that is the big item, right? Because I don't know of any game where commentators are able to do it for a living and that doesn't have dev support. Because it's usually devs are the ones that are willing to put down the money to make sure the stream experience is as good as possible, which like also refers to streamers and stuff as well, who do great work in the community too. And it's not so much a concern of like tournament goers. Like tournament goers, for whatever reason, they have an easier time like I guess it's because it affects them more immediately as an attendee at an event, where it's just like they'll put money for a compendium to fly a player out because then they'll get to play that player. Or they'll put money, or they'll be fine with like money going into like immediately into the pot and stuff, like paying $10 and having it all goes to the pot, because it's like, well, this will also attract a higher caliber of player, which will then make the event itself more fun for me here and now. But I guess for the streaming stuff, like if there's not a lot of investment going in terms of like making sure that like you profit off of people watching the stream itself, which Nintendo would if they're supporting the event because it's selling Switches and copies of Smash Ultimate and all that stuff, then it's harder to find that funding, I guess, to make sure that everybody is financially compensated for their time. So like hopefully Nintendo wants to do it, and it sounds like they do, because like they're pushing the game really hard on their Versus account, and they've done so much work with the community already that I think that they're going to at least be invested like for the beginning of the game. And I think that has a lot of promise, especially if they're going to help fund not just like pots for the event, but also ensure that like the stream of the event is as good as possible too, like they have been for like the E3 Invitationals. So long story, TLDR, it's going to go great if Nintendo's involved. And if it's not, like, it's probably going to be like a more lively version of what we have right now, which means it'll be a lot of fun for us still. It'll be a great hobby to have, and then there are maybe a few people that can somehow swing it by threading that needle as being their full-time thing. But that's like so rare, even as player or as TO or as anything, to be able to be on that level. And like essentially you have to be working at like esports arena or doing something esports related as your job. That's my guess as somebody who's I don't know. I'm not an authority. I'm going to end it on that quote.
Yeah, well, Gpik, I really appreciate you coming on today. Having perspective on all this was invaluable, and it's been a lot of fun additionally. But I was hoping, would you plug yourself for us and tell people where they can find you at?
For sure, for sure. So you can find me on Twitter at Gpik Smash. You can find my Twitch, which is just Gpik. I usually don't actually. I just stream stuff I'm playing for fun most of the time, not so much platform fighter stuff. In terms of watching my upcoming events, you can catch me at the Town and City a lot of weeks whenever I'm in town on Thursday or at Gamers Rebooted. Town and City is at RPSville, which is my sponsor. Shout out to RPSville for helping me so much these past couple of years. And then Gamers Rebooted, as we mentioned earlier, is in Sacramento. The next really big event that I'll be doing is the Shell Showdown happening on October 13th at Esports Arena Oakland, which is an event sponsored by Nickelodeon with like a $3,000 pot bonus for Smash 4. And it's also running Melee, Rivals of Aether, and Icons. And Tweak's already confirmed. I know Zenu's confirmed. I know EE is confirmed. Korean's going to be coming up as well. I think there's like a whole SoCal carpool coming up, but I can't remember everybody else in it off the top of my head. Really exciting. Definitely you want to come check it out if you're, in the NorCal, California area. If not, definitely want to watch it.
I heard Tupac's coming back. He'll be there.
Yeah, he's a huge Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fan, so you can't miss it.
You couldn't miss it. Well, this has been Gpik. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Beyond the Metagame. That was our interview with Gpik, and I thought that went super well. I think that Gpik really showed how much he just loved both Smash and commentating, and he really proved that, not that he needed to, just how much he puts thought into the things that he says on the mic. It isn't just a guy in a booth. This guy really does his homework and really cares about the craft.
Yeah, it's very obvious that he has a real way with words. He kept apologizing for rambling, but it wasn't even rambling. It was very coherent strings of thought that I was very well pieced together. And he kept apologizing for it. I was like, no, I was very enthralled with the way that he was putting all this stuff together, bringing a lot of this perspective, this experience, and kind of bundling it up in this really nice package that anyone who wants to become like a budding commentator will take a lot away from this episode in terms of the attitude you have to have and the mindset you need to employ going into a craft like this.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think now, after wrapping that up well, is time to answer some Twitter questions and or respond to some Twitter comments in a couple instances. I'll read the first one. We got a return questionnaire. Mr. Matana, aka at Diamond Don Fan. He chimes in saying, I am an avid stream watcher. Oftentimes I see two extremes in commentary. Those who are very hype and high energy but lack game knowledge, and those who know quite a bit about the game but sound a bit dead when talking. Would it be good to pair these two types up for balance?
That is an interesting question in terms of the fact that the premise may not be completely true, but let's assume that it is. I don't think two negatives necessarily make a positive. I think a good commentator knows how to riff on the other person's strengths really well and knows how to employ fancy communication techniques to make the other person sound better. I think both of these personalities you described don't have the ability to do that. So I don't think it would be good to necessarily just throw them together just because opposites may attract. Obviously, you might get situations in which they do, but you'll notice, like many really good casting combinations that know how to play like on each other's strengths. You'll notice that with me and Dane on this podcast as co-hosts, we both fulfill certain roles and we know how to tap into each other's strengths. So that would be kind of a good example of the fact that no, I don't think necessarily it's good to pair those two types up, but rather to help them develop skills that would allow them to know how to commentate with anyone else and how to bring out anyone else's strengths. I think that I think it's just a really complicated question, and that there's not necessarily a good answer for whether or not it would necessarily be able to be okay just throwing two people together. Jazara GG Jacob says, what really separates the player gaps in Smash? Low, mid, high, top, and things in between. And what do you think a player should do to keep from plateauing and being able to consistently grow as a player, even if they don't see it?
Yeah, that's a really really good question. I'd like to even kind of tackle that on a full episode maybe one day, but I'll kind of walk through very briefly how I view this. From low to mid, I think low being like you're 0-2 or at a tournament. To go from 0-2 to let's say 2-2, 3-2, getting average in your local bracket, or maybe like top 8 of a small local, right? Being like a pretty good player in your community might make you a mid-level player. To do that, you just have to play the game a lot. You really have to understand matchups. You have to understand, the people that are going 0-2 generally don't have the best tech skill. They don't have the best strategies in game, and don't know how to really abuse the strengths of their character and the weaknesses of their opponents. I think it's very simple. Where it gets a bit more dicey is when you go from mid to high and then high to top. To go from mid-level to high level, you have to put in an extreme amount of time, and you really have to start understanding what your weaknesses are in mindset and in game. So when you get hit, why are you getting hit? When you win, why are you winning? Why are you losing? And I think you have to get there. I think you have to start doing things like VOD review and maybe going out of region a little bit and playing against new blood and really testing yourself and being very self-aware. And then to go from high to top, that is a completely different level, right? To go from like let's say 50th on the PGR or 100th in the world to number 10. I think at that point you really have to go full bore. You have to travel and fight people that are the best of their character. Really make sure that you can never get upset by a random character. You have to understand everything that you possibly can about the game, and you really have to just put as many hours behind the sticks as possible with different people, while already have refined your ability to improve and your ability to to be introspective. That's my answer.
Yeah, I think we should also kind of tackle the plateauing and being able to consistently grow as a player part of the question. I think that in terms of being able to consistently grow, there's no real like awesome answer to this. Obviously, on the show, we've talked about developing different skills simultaneously. We've talked about like just the fact that like having a deep desire for the game, understanding good practice techniques, understanding when not to play too much, and like optimizing your time. I think that's some of the stuff that in previous episodes we've discussed about how to really consistently grow. Do you have anything to add on that, Peon?
I think that you wrapped it up really well, Abby, and I'll throw the next one over to you. Maybe this isn't really so much a question as it is more of a comment. Channel_Balake, the winner of our ultimate giveaway, he writes, the overall feel of the community, in my opinion, has gotten has gotten toxic over the last year and a half, with more hate being spread for Bayo mains. I think that has negatively impacted not only the friendliness of competition, but also can be a contributing factor to lower viewership, which I think is relevant, seeing as we were talking about esports, this episode.
That's a fair sentiment, honestly. There have been a lot more hate around Bayo mains, especially due to the controversial set at Evo, and there is a lot of like general mean sentiments around these players and around the Smash 4 like mentality in general. Half of it's probably due to the fact that the game's phasing out. The other half is due to the fact that it's a fighting game. It's a video game. People are obviously don't have the strongest mentality about it. And whether it's leading to lower viewership, we don't have the numbers on it. But it's a fair point, and I hope that it is addressed with the new game coming out.
Yeah, let's just hope there's balance patches in the next game that extend forever, and also know that it's probably a vocal minority too. I mean, a lot of I still see a lot of smiling faces at the locals I attend.
Yeah, definitely. Like we don't. I think that's a huge point. We see a lot of people like in Twitch chat saying like ruined or Smash 4 is over. It's like I think our brains see what we want to see, and we pick out negative things a lot. When in reality the majority is probably positive. Pastilia the guy asks, why do these players pick the options they do, and what's their overall game plan that they're trying to force their opponent into?
Festilio, I don't know what opponents you're talking about, and I don't know. Okay, so I assume let's just assume that he's talking about, what do players in general? Why do they pick the options that they do, and what's their overall game plan? I mean, generally they try to win. I don't really. I'm not trying to be condescending. I don't know the question, Pastelio. It makes no sense to me. So rephrase it and ask it again in a week, because I want to know where you're going with that, but I don't know how to answer it. But you look good today. Next question, Wizard33 with 2 D's, I might add, aka Ed Boy, aka the homie Edson. He has a real quandary for you, Abby, and I think as the math major of the podcast, you are the guy who is going to be answering this. So, I'll read it quickly. A boy has 45 watermelons in the desert. He needs to get them across to the Oasis Fair, 15 miles away. He can only carry 15 watermelons at a time, and he eats 1 watermelon every mile he walks, including walking back to where he started from. He can also leave watermelons at any mile he has walked, but no fractions of a mile, only at each mile point. How many watermelons can he possibly take to the fair? How do you arrive at your conclusion?
So I think there's only one thing that needs to be addressed in terms of the wording of the question, is whether or not you're eating the watermelon as you go, or you eat the watermelon when you get there. I think the answer that I came up with was I think 5 or 6. It was basically the idea that if you look at the cost of moving the like all 45 of the watermelons 1 mile, what you can do is you move so you take 15 watermelons, you go to the first mile marker, and then you say, okay, I need 1 watermelon to go back. You consumed one watermelon the way there, so you actually only have 14 when you get to the 1 mile marker. So now you drop 13 at the 1 mile marker, and then you go back, so then you have 13 at the 1 mile marker. Now you repeat this with the other 2 times when you have to bring over 15 more watermelons, and what you realize is now you have 39 watermelons at the 1 mile marker. Now what this means is that you spent 6 watermelons going from point 0 to point 1. Now what this means is that you can now iterate on this. You can iterate on this a few times until you get to I believe the 5, or if you get to the 5 mile mark, that means you've spent 30 watermelons. Now what this means is that there's only 15 watermelons left, and then you put those 15 watermelons on your back and you carry all of those to the desert fair, and I think that gets you 5. There might be a better answer to this, but this was my answer that I came up with.
That was genius. All right. Well, ha! All right. Well, this has been Beyond the Metagame. Abhi, where can people find you, my friend?
People can find me at A. Vaidyanatha, my long Indian last name, accompanied with my first initial. On Twitter, you can find this. You can find this on our website. You can also follow Beyond Metagame on Twitter. If you want to follow us, that also has our socials. Where can people find you, Peon?
So you can find me at Peon_GCE. That's Golf Charlie Echo. And of course, you can follow this podcast at Beyond Metagame. And I really, speaking of Twitter, I really want to get a hashtag trending. We really want to get 90s pop culture fashion male icon Fabio on the podcast. So please, can we get a hashtag Fabio to BTM trending? And if you know him personally, get him on the cast. I want to hear what he's up to. But yeah, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We're humbled by the support. Give some love to Gpik if you've stayed all the way to the end. It was so nice of him to join us and make this episode so entertaining. So yeah, go follow him. Go give him some love. And thank you so much, guys.